What's up, you guys, and welcome to my channel, or rather, should I say, our channel. Today's video is going to cover a very suspicious death and how a botched police investigation could hinder one family's search for justice. Today, we are going to be talking about the case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born on June 23rd, 1983 in New York City. She was the only child to her parents Joshua and Sandra Greenberg, and by all accounts, she had a typical normal childhood. She was described as being bubbly and precocious and had this $1 million smile that could instantly put people at ease. And she had this ability to draw her different friend groups together. And when her mom asked her about this, she just smiled and said, "Mom, I make them be friends." So when Ellen was about 11 years old, her family would leave New York and move to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Now, after graduating high school, Ellen would go on to college at Penn State with the ultimate goal of becoming a speech therapist. During her time at Penn State, she was actually a football hostess. I don't know if they have a technical term for this or not, but basically, what that entailed was taking new recruits' families around, showing them the sights, enjoying the perks like getting tickets on the 50-yard line at the Penn State games. She really loved it. She got to be around people and experience new things. While she was at Penn State, Ellen did realize that maybe speech therapy wasn't quite for her, so she would return home and got a job working as a teacher's aide during the day and would attend classes at Temple University at night. It was here that she worked on her degree in education, and when she got this, she went on to Chestnut Hill College, where she got two master's degrees dealing with education. Between 2007 and 2008, Ellen experienced two significant changes in her life. The first was that she got offered a teaching job at Juniata Park Academy, teaching first grade. Sandra, Ellen's mom, said that Ellen wanted to provide the best possible education for her students, and they would even go shopping for the classroom decorations together. The other change came when she was introduced to television producer Samuel Goldberg through a mutual friend's mother. Now, the two hit it off right away on their blind date, and it was said that they just kind of skipped over that awkward dating phase and felt comfortable with each other from the get go. So they dated for about 2.5, 3 years before Sam proposed in the summer of 2010 on a trip to California. And Ellen was ecstatic. Her career was falling into place. She was in a great relationship. She was one step closer to having that family that she always wanted. So at the end of December in 2010, Ellen, Sam, and Ellen's parents would go on vacation to St. Kitts in the Caribbean, where they could enjoy those beautiful beaches, some nice sunshine, and just quality time together. However, Ellen's happy ending didn't come without some bumps in the road. Around this time, Ellen appeared to be struggling with anxiety. And at the beginning of January, Ellen's friends and family noticed the changes in her. Her father said that she didn't appear to be the same Ellen. Debbie Schwab, one of Ellen's closest friends, actually said that she went from being one of the most outgoing, vivacious women to someone filled with anxiety. And during this time, understandably, Ellen didn't like the way she felt. However, when she was asked about her anxiety, she just said that she was struggling with work and getting her grades in on time and planning her August wedding. She was having difficulty sleeping as well, and decisions that she would normally make, she was deferring to Sam. Her father said she would constantly say, "I'll have to check with Sam, I'll have to see what Sam thinks." Ellen actually told her parents that she wanted to quit her job and come home. She didn't say a specific reason why. She didn't point out a cause as being anything or anyone, just that she wanted to come home. And her parents said, "We'll support you with whatever you decide, but we want you to get help for your anxiety." So, heeding her parents' advice, Ellen actually found a psychiatrist, a woman by the name of Dr. Ellen Berman. She would visit her on January 12th, 17th, and 19th. And she just said that she was really stressed out about work. Dr. Berman said that Ellen did not appear to have any suicidal thoughts. And when she questioned her about her relationship with Sam, Ellen just kind of said, "Oh, everything is great." She even smiled when she talked about him. So, Dr. Berman described Ellen as having severe anxiety and prescribed her the sleep aid Ambien as well as the anti anxiety medication Klonopin. So, on January 8th, before Ellen would be seeing Dr. Berman, she texted her mom and said, "I'm starting the med. I know you don't understand, but I can't keep living with feeling this way." And then 9 days later, she texted, "Klonopin helped. Thank God." Her mom responded with, "So happy for you." And Ellen said, "Me too, OMG." On January 22nd, 2011, Ellen sent out her save the date cards for her upcoming August wedding. She appeared to have a treatment plan in place and could hopefully find her confidence again. However, on January 25th, Sandra would text Ellen, "You need to see a professional." And Ellen would respond, "Okay, I'm trying. I'm just a bit scared for everything." Now, Ellen had an appointment with Dr. Berman coming up on January 27th, so 2 days after this text message went out. So Sandra had actually been speaking to Dr. Berman about Ellen. She was very concerned for her daughter, and Dr. Berman just told her that Ellen was stressed because of work. Ellen was torn between whether she wanted to stay at this job and work through these changes or move on. And Dr. Berman told Sandra that at no time did Ellen appear suicidal, just stressed. However, as evidenced by that text on the 25th, Ellen was uneasy about something. Now, could this have been because she was contemplating starting a new job? Was this residual stress from the holidays? Or did she have a reason to be scared? Was there something or someone she was scared of? On January 26th, 2011, the city of Philadelphia was bracing for a massive snowstorm. Schools and businesses were closing early. Children were stoked because they had half of a day and could go and enjoy the rest of their day however they wanted. So Ellen made sure that all of her kids had a way to get home, and then she would leave the school herself. On her way, she would stop and fill up her gas tank before returning to the Venice Lofts, the apartment complex where she lived with her fiance, Sam. So I don't know if Sam went to work that day or worked from home, but Ellen and Sam spent the afternoon together before Sam decided to go for a workout at 4:45 p.m. Now, the gym was in the building. It was part of the amenities package offered by the complex. And he said that he was gone for about 30 minutes before he returned to his sixth floor apartment, where he tried to get in but couldn't because the swinging bar lock on the door was engaged. There will be a photo of this bar lock on screen, but basically it's like a bar lock you would see on a hotel room door, one of those types of locks. So Sam would go downstairs and ask the on duty security guard if he had a tool to open this lock, and the security guard told him, "No, I don't." Sam would return to the apartment where neighbors could hear him yelling for Ellen to open the door. Between 5:30 and 5:52, he would call, email, and text Ellen. And these are the following text messages. "Hello. Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting pissed. Hello. You better have an excuse. What the F? Ah, you have no idea." So at this point, Sam would return downstairs where he would once again speak to the security guard and he would ask him for help in breaking into his apartment. And the security guard obviously said, "No, that's against company policy." So I'm assuming Sam found a way to get inside this apartment. I don't know if he found a way past this bar lock or if he kicked in the door, which some reports suggest that he said he kicked in this door. So just something to keep in the back of your head for later. However, once he got inside his apartment, he would find Ellen unresponsive on the kitchen floor. So at 6:33 p.m., Sam called 911. Now, this call has not been released to the public, but Guy DeAndrea, who is a former homicide prosecutor in Philadelphia, has heard this call and he shared his observations. He stated that the call lasted roughly about 5 minutes, in which Sam can be heard saying, oh my God, my fiance, there's blood." And when the dispatcher was trying to gather information about what was going on, Sam kept going on about how he had been to the gym and he just returned home. So the dispatcher informed Sam that he would need to begin CPR and that they could walk him through it. And allegedly, his response was, "Do I have to?" 3 minutes into the 5 minute 911 call, Sam points out that there is a knife protruding from Ellen's chest, and he thinks she must have fallen on it. It's at this point that the dispatcher instructs him to stop CPR. Now, first responders arrived to the Venice lofts within a matter of minutes, and at 6:40 p.m., Ellen Greenberg was declared deceased. When investigators arrived on the scene at 8:27 p.m., they were greeted with a baffling sight. Everything seemed to be in order. There was money, keys, and 3 laptop computers. One was even sitting out on the counter in the kitchen. Ellen's prescription medications were on the nightstand in the bedroom, and her engagement ring was either on or in that nightstand. They also found her cell phone in the bathroom. Ellen herself was found in the kitchen. Now, the kitchen was set up in a U shape. So you had the door to the apartment on the same wall as the refrigerator, and then at the bottom of the U was the stove, and then on the other side of the U was the sink and the bar seating area. And Ellen was found between the stove and the sink. And she was wearing a dark colored zip shirt over a t-shirt. She had on gray sweatpants and light brown Ugg boots. She had a hair tie around her right wrist, and clenched in her left hand was a pristine white tea towel. There was also a pair of glasses laying somewhere nearby. The knife found in Ellen's chest was embedded through her clothing, and on scene, the investigators also examined multiple other stab wounds, but they also noted the lack of defensive wounds. She had no defensive wounds on her body. Ellen had blood on her head, in her hair, on her neck, on the front of her t-shirt and pants, as well as on her shoes. And there was also blood found on the sole of her right Ugg boot. Now, the blood was confined to that small area. Ellen had the blood on her, as well as underneath her and on the cabinets behind her. There was a small blood splatter on the cabinet to the left, as well as 2 small blood splatters on the granite countertop above. On the counter, there was a strainer with blueberries and cut up orange in it. There were 2 knives found in the sink, and the knife in Ellen's chest matched an overturned knife block on the counter. So as I mentioned earlier, the door was locked via the swinging bar latch, but there was also another entry point that could have made accessing the apartment possible. Ellen and Sam lived on the 6th floor, and they had an outdoor patio. However, on January 26th, the snowstorm rolled in, and there was no evidence that anyone had been on this patio, so investigators quickly ruled this out as a source of entry. Now we're going to go into more discrepancies from the scene, or things that just seemed off, starting with Sam and the security guard. The security guard stated that Sam kept telling him he had been at the gym, similar to how he was telling the 911 dispatcher. And we know he was at the gym. So the Venice lofts issue their tenants key fobs. So if you wanted to come in or access the amenities like the gym, you would kind of scan your fob. And there are records that Sam went to the gym at the time he said he did. There is also surveillance video showing him entering this gym. Now, there is no surveillance video on the 6th floor showing what happened outside the apartment, but they did catch him going into the gym. However, the thing the security guard found odd was that even though he kept telling him he'd been to the gym, Sam wasn't wearing sneakers. He was wearing boots. After the security guard told him that there was no tool to open the swinging bar lock, talk turned to kicking in the door. And they actually looked at this door and discovered that there was minimal damage, indicating that someone really didn't kick it in. So Sam must have found a way past this swinging bar lock. He also would tell investigators that the security guard accompanied him upstairs, but the security guard signed a sworn affidavit that said he didn't leave his post. So at this point, we only have Sam's word that the bar lock was engaged at all. And upon further investigation of this lock, investigators would discover that there was one screw that was loose. It wasn't even kicked out all the way from the lock. It was just loose, just one screw. And now we're going to get into the text messages. So the text Sam sends to Ellen start out innocently enough. Hello, what are you doing? But then to me, they escalate rather quickly. I'm getting pissed. You better have an excuse. You have no idea? No idea of what. And why does a grown woman need an excuse for not answering the door? She could have been in the shower. She could have fallen asleep and not heard Sam outside. We know that she was prescribed Ambien. She could have just taken her dose and fallen asleep. Or she could have fallen and not been able to get to her phone. Remember, her phone was found in the bathroom. So she could have fallen in the living room and not been able to get help. Let's remember here that Ellen was prescribed both Ambien and Klonopin and was dealing with anxiety. So wouldn't you logically think that Sam's first response should have been concern? Are you okay? What's going on? I'm getting worried. But here his first response is anger, and his tone comes off completely controlling. Just the first text, hello, one word, that's it. That's all he feels that he needs to say in that moment to get Ellen's attention. Almost like he's used to her immediately responding. And then comes open the door, followed by what are you doing? So open the door. Now he's issuing a direct command rather than asking what she's doing first. In this instance, it comes second. So we could also pair that with open the door and see it as, you better open the door and what are you doing? Or in other words, what is more important than me in this moment? And then the message, I'm getting pissed. Now, I feel that this was sent as a threat to Ellen. I mean, I know that I've been in situations before where I've been very frustrated and I tell them, hey, I'm getting pissed. But here, combined with all the other messages, it seems more ominous somehow. Almost like if Ellen saw that message, she would know what it would mean and would act accordingly, or in other words, act like Sam wanted her to. I personally believe that there was more to this relationship than anyone saw from an outside viewpoint, and we'll get into more on that in a little bit. Just something to keep in mind for now. So at 5:52 p.m., Sam ceased contact with Ellen. We know that he had been trying to reach her via banging on the door or calling her, emailing her, and texting her, but at 5:52 that stops. Now at 6:33 is the time the 911 call was placed. So this leaves 41 minutes unaccounted for. 41 minutes where Sam calls his parents, which is completely understandable. He's locked out of his apartment. He doesn't know what to do. His fiance isn't responding. He might be concerned. He might need their advice. Whatever reason, completely understandable, right? What's kind of odd about this, though, is he proceeds to call his uncle, who was an attorney, before he even placed a 911 call. So when he finally gets into the apartment and he's instructed to begin CPR, he allegedly responds with, do I have to? The dispatcher also noted that he was very calm, even though his words seemed more frantic, like, oh my God, my fiance. He seemed really calm. We know that the dispatcher instructed him to stop CPR when he told them of the knife in Ellen's chest. So this would indicate to me that he told them he had begun CPR. But if this is the case here, that would have meant that Ellen's body would have been moved. However, there is no indication that she was moved. If Sam had been doing CPR, like the dispatcher was led to believe, logically, Ellen would have been laid flat on her back on the floor. But all the blood at the scene was found condensed in the area of those cabinets right where first responders found her body. So unless Sam would have cleaned up after he had been trying CPR, there was no way he could have moved Ellen from the middle of the floor over to the counters. And we know that between 6:33 and 6:40, there was no time to clean up. I don't know how quickly the first responders got there, but Ellen was declared deceased at 6:40. So that's just a 7-minute window. So there's no way that she would have been moved in this 7 minutes. However, there was evidence that she was moved. There was a blood trail running horizontally from Ellen's nose to, I believe, her left ear. That would have meant that at some point she'd been on her side for the blood to have moved in that direction. Now, when investigators showed up at the Venice lofts, they found Sam waiting with some family and friends. And we don't know the names of anyone that was there except one person. We know that Samuel's father, Richard Goldberg, was there. He was actually the one that called Joshua and Sandy, who were snowed in Harrisburg. According to Sandra on the Catch My Killer podcast, Richard called and said, "Hi, Richard Goldberg here. Something terrible has happened to Ellie." Sandra asked where the ambulance was, and Richard told her there wasn't one. Sam was upstairs, and he would call back with more updates. And at this point, the Greenbergs are snowed in an hour and 45 minutes away, and I can't even imagine what they're going through, but their nightmare was just beginning. So we discussed some weird behaviors going on that night, but now we're going to get into the investigation, or rather, the lack of one. So the police saw the engagement ring in the bedroom. They saw this overturned knife block on the counter. There was no blood or tissue located on the two knives in the kitchen sink, and underneath the sink was completely dry. There was also a substantial lack of blood found at the scene, especially considering the amount of wounds Ellen sustained, which we're going to get to when we go over the autopsy. With all of this being said, the police took into account Ellen's lack of defensive wounds, her prescriptions for Ambien and Klonopin, and the fact that the bar lock was engaged, and they stated that they thought Ellen had committed suicide, even though we only have Sam's word on that bar lock. And a quick little side note on this bar lock. It's not impossible to get through. In fact, it seems rather easy if you just do a video search on YouTube. There are numerous ways to open this type of lock with gum, with dental floss, with basically a piece of paper, really anything that you might have on you. So a little note, if you're ever staying at a hotel, always lock the bottom lock, never just rely on that swinging bar lock, because yeah. Well, here's where I'm going to drag out my little soapbox and get on my 2-second rant. I was a criminal justice major for about 3 years, and every single class I took, my professors always told us to always treat a scene like a homicide until you can prove otherwise. Every death should be a homicide, and it's up to you as the investigator to prove that it's not. That means closing the crime scene, putting someone on watch at that crime scene, isolating suspects, questioning witnesses, following the proper procedure for collecting evidence like fingerprints, DNA, trash, and even conducting luminol tests when necessary. And we want to know what the Philadelphia Police Department did here on this long checklist of things you have to do at a crime scene. Do we want to guess what they did here? They did one thing. They questioned Sam. They decided that Ellen had committed suicide and stayed at the scene for what I've heard to be less than an hour. Now, Sam did stay at the scene and was very cooperative with law enforcement. They placed him in handcuffs as a matter of procedure and took him down to the police station, where he would refuse to speak without a lawyer present. No big deal, right? If you take one thing away from this channel, I would hope it would be the victim's stories that I'm trying to spread. But if you take two things away from this channel, I would really hope that it is never talk to police until you have a lawyer present. And a lawyer did finally show up. Now, it wasn't Sam's uncle that he called before he called 911. It was a different lawyer who was a criminal defense attorney. And while he was there, he did give a brief formal statement just stating what we'd already gone over earlier, that Ellen had got home early that day, that he left about 4:45 to go to the gym and then came back and found the door locked. Pretty much all he said. When he was asked for later interviews, he declined. Now, DeAndrea said that this was not really unusual or surprising. He doesn't really have to say anything else, especially if this case has been ruled a suicide. So police failed to get fingerprints, like I mentioned, and I think that it could have shown more about what happened in Ellen's last minutes. We know that Sam and Ellen's fingerprints would have been found all over that apartment, and it could have shown if someone else was in there, true, but in my opinion, it could have also shown how things were touched. So, for example, we know that Ellen was at the counter. There was blood found in the fruit bowl. And if she was facing the counter and she was attacked by someone, Wouldn't you logically think that, so say this is the counter, she would have grabbed it like this or like this to kind of steady herself. Now, when I'm cleaning my counters, I'm not grabbing my counters. I'm wiping a cloth over the top. So it would have been interesting to me if there would have been fingerprints under the lip of that counter. And also, the knife block was tipped over. What? There could have been prints taken off this knife block to show if there were full or partial handprints, indicating it had been pushed in a struggle. I will say, in all my years of owning a knife block, I've never accidentally tipped my knife block over. It's too heavy. It's not impossible, but I am the clumsiest person in the world, and it's difficult to do. Even when you're moving it to clean it, it just doesn't fit. And the lack of blood found in the kitchen should have indicated that luminol testing needed to be done at the very least. Tom Brennan is a former detective turned investigative analyst who is actually working with the Greenberg family, and he is absolutely disgusted at the lack of police work that went on that day. He said they came in, looked around, said suicide, and left. Now, this next bit does have some of the information from the autopsy, so if you are sensitive to that kind of information, just go ahead and skip ahead a little bit. Also, I will be looking down to reference my notes, so I'm really sorry about that. 9 a.m. on January 27th, the day after Ellen was found deceased in her apartment, Assistant Medical Examiner Marlon Osborne began Ellen's autopsy. The knife that was found in her chest had a blade that measured roughly about 5 inches, and the wound was about 4 inches deep or 10 centimeters. Along with this, there were 7 other wounds to Ellen's chest, 1 to her abdomen, 1 to her scalp, and 10 to the back of her neck, 2 of which penetrated her brain. Altogether, Ellen had 20 stab wounds on her body. Osborne also noted that she had 11 bruises in various stages of healing, all on her right side and all in areas that could be covered by clothing. They were on her upper arm, her forearm, her thigh, and her abdomen. And he stated that these could have been made by someone else or through contact sport. I want to note here that Ellen did not play contact sports, but it was possible for her to have inflicted these bruises on herself. Because of the numerous stab wounds to the back of Ellen's neck, a question of if her spinal cord had been severed came into play. So if her spinal cord had been severed, it would have rendered her immediately incapacitated, meaning there was no way she could have inflicted the last stab wound, the one to her chest, herself. At this time, the medical examiner's office did not have a neuropathologist on site, so they would contract with a neuropathologist to do this type of work for them, and I believe they used the same one regularly, and that was a woman by the name of Dr. Lucy Rourke. And Dr. Rourke stated that there was no defect to the spinal cord. Toxicology reports showed that Ellen had Ambien and Klonopin in her system, and when investigators looked at her pills, they were all accounted for, meaning Ellen was not abusing her medications. Osborne concluded the autopsy at about 11 a.m., and he ruled Ellen's death a homicide. He said that the knife lodged in her chest was indicative of a lot of force being used. So, according to Brennan, on the same day that the autopsy is being conducted, Sam's uncle and cousin go to the Venice Lofts to pick up a suit for Sam for Ellen's funeral. However, when they left, they had more than a suit in their possession. They had with them Sam's laptop, Ellen's personal laptop, her work laptop, and her cell phone. And it was noted that Ellen's laptop was not password protected, but I don't know if this was both of them or just her personal or her work. I was unable to find that information. Now, on the Justice for Ellen Facebook page, they actually did a Facebook Live with Guy DeAndrea, and he made it seem like investigators gave Sam these electronics on the night of the 26th. So, I'm not sure which report is accurate, but they both agree that the Goldbergs had these electronic devices, and police would not get them until January 29th. So, in other words, anything found on these electronic devices would be inadmissible in court because the chain of evidence had been broken. Sandra stated that she never gave police permission to remove Ellen's electronics, her handbag, or her engagement ring from the apartment, and that they didn't even get them from the police. They had to make arrangements through Sam, his father, and his uncle to obtain Ellen's property. On Friday, January 28th, family held Ellen's funeral in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Joshua and Sandra were preparing for the funeral when they were told by a friend of the medical examiner's ruling. And that friend had heard it through a news report. So Joshua got up and eulogized his daughter and then broke the news to the crowded temple that this was a homicide. And everyone was stunned. You could hear a pin drop. So on the Catch My Killer podcast, Sandra stated that the family was all headed back to her mother's house to observe Shiva. Now, Shiva is a time of mourning in the Jewish faith, and it usually lasts about a week. And Sandra said it took an extremely long time for Sam and his family to even get there from the temple. And once they were there, his uncle did not even look at her one time. No eye contact, not even a word of condolence. Nothing. On January 29th, the day after Ellen's funeral, a police spokesperson openly disagreed with the ruling of homicide from the medical examiner's office and stated that they still believed it was a suicide and they were looking into any mental health issues that Ellen had. Simply put, they were not changing their minds, even though they had no medical experience to support their conclusion. Detectives believe that the information they gathered supported the suicide theory. Ellen was on these medications. She was found in a locked apartment. There was no one else's DNA found on the knife. And there was no sign of a struggle. She also had shallow puncture wounds on her body, and they thought that these were probably hesitation wounds. Now, typically, the police will not openly state their opinion. They will wait for the medical examiner's findings to come back and then work in tandem to figure out what happened to the victim. In fact, a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer said that she has never before or since seen the police openly challenge the medical examiner's ruling. While the Greenbergs were desperately trying to find out what happened to their daughter, life was going on. A new teacher had taken over Ellen's classes, and they stated that along with the lip glosses they found in every single drawer, there was no sign that she was struggling. Everything was perfect. On March 7th of 2011, the medical examiner's office actually changed the cause of Ellen's death at the insistence of the police. Ellen's death was now officially labeled a suicide. One of the detectives stated that they were just letting things go where they went, and that was the direction that it went. Understandably, Joshua and Sandra were devastated. And once again, they did not receive a call from law enforcement to inform them of this decision. Rather, they heard it through the media. And at this point, the Greenbergs are fed up. They know that there is no way their daughter, who declined getting a second piercing in her ears because she was so afraid of the pain, would have committed suicide. So they do the only thing they can do. They start their own investigation. And you guys, they were fought by law enforcement every single step of the way. They didn't have the recording of the 911 call. They did not have the video surveillance footage from the Venice lofts. They did not have this questionable search history from Ellen's computer that we are going to get back to in just a little bit. All in all, they needed help. And at the advice of a friend, the Greenbergs took Ellen's case to a forensic pathologist, a man by the name of Dr. Cyril H. Wecht. Now, a lot of you will know Dr. Wecht from his consulting on the JFK assassination, the John Benet Ramsey case, the Lacey Peterson case. He has consulted on numerous cases and is a huge name in the true crime world. He reviewed Ellen's case file, and on January 11th, 2012, he returned his findings. Dr. Wecht's report states, suicidal stab wounds can rarely be multiple. Suicides by stabbing are becoming less frequent, with simpler choices being drugs, hanging, or gunshot. Cutting of the wrist and throat is often associated with suicide, whereas stab wounds to the back are unlikely to be suicide. A murder usually involves multiple stab wounds to the side, back, or stomach. In a suicide, there may be additional cuts across the wrist or tentative stabbings to see if it will hurt or work up the courage. Then there will usually only be one wound, and most likely in the chest. The location of the stab wounds high up the back of the neck and lower back of head are also unlikely for self-inflicted wounds. A suicide victim will rarely stab herself through her clothing. Instead, she will open her shirt to expose the skin. Stabbing through clothing may indicate homicide. It is not known if fingerprints on the knife were taken and examined. Following the review of all submitted documents, the results of the autopsy, and the accounts from the investigation, based upon a reasonable degree of medical certainty, it is my professional opinion that the manner of death of Ellen Greenberg is strongly suspicious of homicide. So the Greenbergs had Dr. Weck's report, but that was only the start. In February of 2012, they hired an attorney by the name of Larry Krasner. Now, Larry Krasner was known for taking on the police. He had built up this reputation, and after looking at Ellen's case file, he stated that there were a lot of unanswered questions. In May of 2012, he actually arranged a meeting between the Greenbergs, the police, and the district attorney's office, trying to get the case reopened, but nothing would come from this. Around this time, more people would become involved in Ellen's case. So as we mentioned earlier, Tom Brennan and Guy DeAndrea both came on board, as well as a man by the name of Walter Cohen, who replaced Krasner as the family's attorney and worked for them pro bono. Cohen helped the family file a formal report asking for Ellen's case file, and they were finally granted access to come look at the information the police had. But they were at a major disadvantage. You see, Joshua and Sandra were told that they were the only ones that could come look at this information, that they could not take notes, could not make copies, couldn't even take a picture, and they couldn't even make a phone call to contact Brennan and ask him questions. And they didn't even know where to start or what to look for. While the Greenbergs were being stalled, Brennan and DeAndrea were actually making strides in the case of their own. Brennan stated that the lack of defensive wounds on Ellen's body wasn't unusual and could have indicated a blitz attack. Now, a blitz attack is when someone is attacked so quickly they don't have time to defend themselves. At this point, though, that was just a theory. The Greenbergs really couldn't prove anything. That is, until there was a major break in the case. DeAndrea was actually reviewing Ellen's case file when he noted that there was only one line talking about Ellen's spinal cord, and that line stated that Dr. Lucy Rourke examined the spinal cord and found that there was no defect. So understandably, he wanted to see the neuropathology report for himself, but it wasn't with the files that was given to the family. When he reached out to the police and the medical examiner's office, he was told they couldn't find it or it didn't exist. There was also no invoice for Dr. Rourke's services, so the team reached out to her themselves. And she responded via email. She said, "I would conclude that I did not see the specimen in question, although there is a remote possibility that it was shown to me. However, I have no recollection of such a case." During this time, a piece of Ellen's spinal cord was actually found in the medical examiner's office, and if they had sent this out like they said they did, why would it still be there, especially if they'd ruled her case as suicide? So after this discovery, an independent forensic pathologist named Dr. Wayne K. Ross was contracted to examine this part of Ellen's spinal cord. His report came back on January 10th of 2017, and it is brief, so I'm just going to read it word for word. It said, "Materials received. Inspection date of organ tissue, August 3rd, 2016. Scene photographs. Autopsy report. Autopsy photographs. After review of the above information, I can offer the following opinions to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. 1. There was evidence of a stab wound which penetrated the cranial cavity and severed the cranial nerves and brain. As a result, she would experience severe pain, cranial nerve dysfunction, and traumatic brain signs and symptoms, including numbness, tingling, irregular heartbeat and bradycardia, respiratory depression, neurogenic shock, and impaired or loss of consciousness. 2. There was evidence of strangulation. There was a mark over the front of the neck which was consistent with a fingernail mark. There were multiple bruises under the neck and in the strap muscles over the right side of the neck. The patterns were compatible with a manual strangulation. 3. There were multiple bruises over the body, some of which were fresh, many of which were older. The patterns were consistent with a repeated beating. 4. The scene findings were indicative of a homicide. Should further investigation become available, we reserve the right to amend this report at that time. Signed, Wayne K. Ross, MD. So Ellen's spinal cord had been severed, and 2 of the stab wounds penetrated her brain. Renowned forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee would also become involved in the case, and after he examined Ellen's case file, he came to the same conclusion that Drs. Wecht and Ross had, that the types of wounds and bloodstain patterns were consistent with a homicide. So armed with these expert reports, the Greenbergs reached out to their old lawyer, Larry Krasner, hoping he could help. See, in 2017, Krasner was actually elected district attorney, and he was the best chance that the Greenbergs had of getting Ellen's case reopened. However, in February of 2018, Krasner passed Ellen's case over to the Attorney General's office to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. So Ellen's case gets passed on, and the Greenbergs hear nothing. A reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer actually had to press for answers. And then in March of 2019, the Attorney General's office finally released a statement. Spokesperson Joe Grace stated, following the initial 2011 investigation carried out by the Philadelphia Police Department, our office received this case in 2018 on a conflict referral from the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. We conducted our own thorough investigation to determine a manner of death, interviewing the chief medical examiner of Philadelphia and the medical examiner who performed the autopsy, meeting with the family's representatives and reviewing the information they provided to our attorneys, among other steps. Among the additional evidence we reviewed were web searches for methods of committing suicide, quick death, and depression done on Miss Greenberg's personal computer in the weeks before her death, and text messages between Miss Greenberg and a family member on the day of her death showing the decedent in serious mental distress. Our office has concluded that this evidence supports suicide as the manner of death. Accordingly, we have communicated our findings to the family through its representatives and have closed the investigation. Remember those computers the Goldbergs took before the police even knew what to do with them? Yeah, they're making their return. And guess what? The information found on these computers that was inadmissible in court because the chain of evidence had been broken is the information that the Attorney General's office is now relying on to state that Ellen's death was a suicide. So they want to talk about these search results. We're going to go ahead and talk about it. The Regional Computer Forensics Laboratory apparently searched Ellen's electronics and returned their report to the police on April 1st of 2011. I feel like it's a joke too. Don't worry. Now, DeAndrea questioned these search results. They were not concluded in a report from the ME on April 15th of 2011, nor were they included in Ellen's case file. It actually turns out that the Attorney General had to reach out to the RCFL themselves to get this report, as it was not included in the file from the District Attorney's office. Grace said that he didn't know if anyone from the DA or the police department actually looked at these files or not. My money is on not. He went on to say that even though Dr. Rourke had no recollection of examining Ellen's spinal cord, he believed there was ample evidence based on one line in the autopsy that stated she did it and 2 detectives' eyewitness accounts. And furthermore, they would not be releasing Ellen's files to her family. So let me get this straight. You believe that Ellen's death is a suicide, the case has been closed, but you can't even give the Greenbergs their daughter's files, even just to give them peace of mind? Are you kidding? They deserve to know what happened to their daughter. And who's to even say that Ellen was the one conducting those searches? Ellen's computer wasn't password protected according to Brennan, and even if it was, someone she trusted could have still had that login information. So the first hit that they found on this computer was from December 18th at 2:36 p.m. There was some Google searches done for suffocation as well as a Wikipedia hit for suicide methods. But I'm wondering when the school closed for winter break in 2010. Did it close before December 18th or did it close after December 18th? So, where I'm from, the schools close like this. At 2 p.m., the high school lets out. At 3 p.m., the middle school lets out. And then at 4 p.m., the elementary school lets out. Ellen was an elementary school teacher. I do not know if they follow that same schedule in Philadelphia or not. And I don't even know when their winter break was. I have tried to research that information but couldn't find it anywhere. So if anybody just happens to know, please let me know. Because if school were still in session, it would be strange for her to have made these computer searches, especially if they were done on her personal computer. Logically, you would assume that Ellen would only take one laptop to school with her work laptop. Why would she even bring her personal laptop to school? So the rest of the computer search results were as follows. On January 3rd at 12:09 a.m., there were searches conducted for sex fantasy death as well as model death. January 6th at 1:57 a.m., there were searches for Zoloft and Zoloft versus Prozac, as well as the side effect benefits for Zoloft versus Prozac. On January 9th at 3:15 a.m., there were hits for sertraline, which is Zoloft, weight gain with Zoloft, and depression with Zoloft. And I do believe that Ellen was taking Zoloft before she started going to Dr. Berman. This was evidenced in the January 8th text to her mom, or thinking about taking Zoloft. I just couldn't really find that in the timeline anywhere, but I want to say that she was taking it for a brief period of time. So those searches were done at 3:15 in the morning, and then the same day, January 9th at 11:35 p.m., there were searches for girl electrocuted to death while using Twitter in the bathtub and Google Analytics. Then the last results, January 10th at 12:41 a.m., there were searches for quick suicide, quick death, and euthanasia. So something to note here on the search results from January 9th regarding depression, there is no search for anything to do with death or suicide. Also, the results from the evening of January 9th show that someone was looking at Google Analytics. Now, analytics are typically used to see how something is tracking. For example, YouTubers look at their analytics quite a lot. They want to determine, who their target age range is, or who's watching their channel, who is, spending more time on their channel than others. It will provide very critical information. So basically, you're looking at your analytics to see if your target audience is being reached. Now, why would Ellen need to be looking at Google Analytics? This, to me, makes more sense if Sam is looking at it. He's a television producer. He needs to keep track of these things, where Ellen, nothing in her life indicated that she had a YouTube channel or needed these things at all. But Sam would work with these things every day. And if he was the one doing this search, could he have been behind the other searches as well? So on October 15th of 2019, the Greenbergs filed a civil lawsuit against the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, as well as Dr. Marlon Osborne, who conducted Ellen's autopsy. They are trying to get Ellen's death changed from suicide to could not be determined because of the evidence that experts found that shows some of these injuries could not have been self-inflicted. And another thing they stated in their lawsuit is that there was evidence that two knives were used. Ellen had both smooth and serrated edge wounds, but a second knife was never recovered. Now, the medical examiner's office and Dr. Osborne obviously raised objections to this lawsuit, but you guys, all the snaps in the world for lady judges. On January 8th of this year, Judge Paula Patrick allowed the case to proceed. Now, unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, things in courts have been pushed back, and there is no court date set for Ellen's case as of right now. However, you can get involved by going over to change.org and signing the petition to get Ellen's case reopened, and I will leave that linked in the description. So for about a year, Sam stayed in contact with Ellen's family, with communications becoming less frequent as time went on. According to Sandra on the Catch My Killer podcast, Sam was always courteous and their conversations were always pleasant enough, but she would always end the call by saying, "We know that Ellen did not commit suicide." And it would get a moment of awkward silence, which So Sam would go on to get engaged, and he actually sent the Greenbergs an email telling them about this, and he would send them a few more until communications eventually stopped altogether. He did get married and had 2 children of his own. In December of 2019, the Greenbergs actually went on the Dr. Oz show where they used a technique known as photogrammetry to show that Ellen's death was a homicide. I'll leave this linked in the description, and I highly encourage you guys to go check it out for yourself. The Greenbergs know that Ellen did not commit suicide, and they will continue to fight to prove it. So what do I think happened to Ellen? Based on my research, I believe there is no way that Ellen Greenberg committed suicide. Something happened in December that caused her anxiety, and the following is my own hypothetical theory of the events leading up to her death. In December of 2010, something happened between Ellen and Sam. Now, I did see a rumor that Sam began dating really quickly after Ellen's death. However, I only saw this reference in one place and cannot verify it with another source. What if he was hypothetically having an affair, or he could have just been controlling? And tensions began to build with something happening on December 18th to where he decided that he would be better off without Ellen. Hence the random searches for suffocation and suicide methods. The computer forensic report showed nothing before this, and these were the only searches done that day, indicating someone had intent to look this up. They didn't just stumble across this. This wasn't just an ad that popped up on the computer and this person fell down a rabbit hole searching this, like I have done so many times with so many different subjects. No, someone went on the computer to purposely search out suicide and suffocation. And I personally believe there is a far leap from simply having a bad day at work to wanting to come home and Google searches about suicide. So we know during this time that the school district was implementing new changes, and this could have caused Ellen's anxiety, or it could have been a convenient excuse for her behavioral changes. If she was hypothetically experiencing a hard time in her relationship, it's completely understandable as to why she didn't want to say anything. The holidays can be a stressful time for many people, and maybe Ellen just wanted to give Sam the benefit of the doubt. They had spent 3 years together, and this was the man that she was going to marry. She didn't want anyone to think negatively of him, so she just brushed his behavior aside and maybe thought they just needed time to reconnect. And what better place to do it than in St. Kitts? They could just hit reset on their relationship, work out whatever kink they were going through, just enjoy being together without the stresses of life and work and the holidays, just be by themselves in this beautiful destination. However, upon returning from St. Kitts, things would hypothetically get much worse, often resulting in physical violence. Ellen sustained bruising over the course of several days, and all of these bruises were in places that could be concealed by clothing. She wanted to go home, to get away from the situation, but she still didn't want to disparage Sam. Maybe she was ashamed, or perhaps she was made to feel like so many people in abusive situations that the abuse was her fault. So she enlisted the help of Dr. Ellen Berman, and together they were working on a plan to treat her own anxiety. Her medications began to work, and Ellen was starting to feel better. She had hope again. It was just a bad phase. Every couple had them. No big deal. So she decides to stay in Philly and get back on track. That is until January 25th. Perhaps they hypothetically had a fight. She sought out help. Her medications were working. She was focusing on herself. And it finally made her see that Sam was actually the issue. Police reports state that Ellen's engagement ring was actually found either on or in the nightstand. Now, I've never been engaged, but I know there are only a few reasons that women will take off their engagement ring. One is if the ring needs to be resized, which in the photos of Ellen wearing her engagement ring, it looks like it fits pretty darn well to me. Another reason is that their joints are swollen. Now, Ellen wasn't pregnant, but perhaps her medication could have been the cause of swollen joints. However, both Ambien and Klonopin do not list swelling as one of their side effects. I have never taken either of these, so I do not know. If you have and you have experienced swelling, please let me know. The last reason, and the one that I think is hypothetically the most likely, is that Ellen and Sam got into a fight. Perhaps Ellen just needed to clear her head and took off her ring as more of a symbolic gesture, you know what I mean? Like couples argue, she takes off the ring, walks away, and then everything works itself out. She was preparing fruit salad right before she died, indicating there were no plans of her leaving. Now, hypothetically, there was some trigger on the 26th, something that made Sam angry. He hypothetically saw his opportunity and took it, attacking Ellen before heading off to the gym and establishing his alibi. Remember, we only have Sam's word that the swinging bar lock was preventing entry into the apartment. A lock that can easily be opened from the outside, and there was minimal damage to both the door and the lock. So hypothetically, Sam knew that he still needed to make an attempt to contact Ellen, and that is where the text messages come into play. And it's here that he texts her the only way he knows how to communicate with her, through aggression and manipulation. Now, hypothetically, he has no clue how this is going to work out, but he's been working on staging this for over a month. Where he catches his break is through the incompetence of the police department. They saw what they were meant to see and stated Ellen had committed suicide. Case closed. So Guy DeAndrea actually stated that he didn't feel this was a cover-up by law enforcement. He had to get approval to look at Ellen's case from his higher-ups, several of whom were involved in Ellen's case. And they could have easily pushed this under the rug without much of an excuse. They could have just said, oh, you have too much work to do on other active cases. Don't look into this one. And he really wouldn't have thought nothing of it. He would have just thought, hey, I have too much work of my own, whatever. Instead, everyone was very supportive of him looking at Ellen's case. So to me, this indicates that police were merely manipulated from the start, and once they got going down this path, they did not want to admit their error. But now we are officially done with the H word, and we are at the end of this video. Ellen was a joyful, outgoing, successful woman who liked to cook and adored fashion. She had her whole life ahead of her, but instead it was unjustly taken when she was only 27 years old. I personally believe that it is going to take someone coming forward to truly get justice for Ellen, but in the meantime, hopefully the courts will examine the evidence in her case and change the ruling, if not to homicide, then at least to could not be determined. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to Ellen's story today. Please go ahead and sign the change.org petition, check out the Dr. Oz clips, and go ahead and follow the Justice for Ellen Facebook group and share that on your social media. And if you have any information surrounding this case, please reach out to the Facebook group as well. I do post new videos every Wednesday and Saturday and would love for you guys to hit that subscribe button and follow me on my social media. If you have any cases you would like me to cover, please leave them down in the comments along with your thoughts on Ellen's story. With that being said, I'm going to go and I will see you in my next video. Bye!